Gears a little bit on a different note, because this has a lot of people talking. If we looked at today's date, you're going to be taking a live look at New York City, where of course this morning there was a solemn ceremony at the Ground Zero Memorial, because on this day 23 years ago our nation was attacked on America's soil like it never was before. So today we remember and honor the thousands of Americans whose lives were taken.
That's right, and as our nation commemorates the anniversary of the attacks, the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York City allows citizens to come together and offer a place to reflect. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has more.
6 bells, 6 moments of silence to mark the shockwaves that morning 23 years ago. Planes hitting in New York, at the Pentagon, in a field in Pennsylvania. The Twin Towers collapsing. 2,977 people were killed.
Alvin Peter Kappelman Jr.
Their names are read aloud here at Ground Zero every year. In attendance today, President Joe Biden, along with Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, just hours after they faced off in Philadelphia. In the middle of a contentious election battle, there may be a lesson from 9/11.
We hope people will set aside divisions and fractiousness and come together, recognize the unity, the compassion, and the courage that characterized the aftermath of 9/11.
Beth Hillman is the president of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Part of her mission, reaching a generation of young people who need to learn about 9/11. More than 100 million Americans who were born after 2001 or were too young to remember the tragic day.
The museum teaches about the day, but it also teaches about the aftermath. How has that changed?
Well, I think we continue to learn more. History isn't static. We look at how we've learned to better understand terrorism, even as we haven't been able to actually end it yet.
The museum gets millions of visitors every year.
It really makes you realize how terrible it was.
The Gordon Smith family lives in South Carolina.
Why was it important to come here today?
We have 2 kids who didn't live through this, right? And so it's telling a story to them.
Caroline Hurry and Peyton Hewlin go to Auburn University.
You may not understand what it felt like on the day, but do you think you understand at this point the effect that it had on the country?
Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I can see it.
Never forget also means making sure a new generation understands.
I don't think I could have said that any better.
That's
you know,
right,
exactly.
absolutely.
So when we say never forget, we have to mean it. So there are so many adult Americans alive today that were not alive back in 2001, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, I'm glad that they were able to mention that and talk to those folks, of course, too.
Absolutely. And today there's so many events and memorials happening across the country that those impacted can be remembered and be honored, including some happening right here in Mid-Michigan.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Mid-Michigan knows how to kind of really host these important ceremonies and events. So over in Mason, they're holding what is called their annual Mason Cares event. And it's actually happening right now. It started back at 1 o'clock and it goes until 7 p.m. right on West Ash Street. Volunteers will be honoring those lost, but also honoring first responders by caring and cleaning the station to show their appreciation. And then, of course, later tonight at 7 p.m. will be a memorial service.
That's right. In other ways people can recognize this day are through acts of service, volunteering opportunities, and one of those being with Habitat for Humanity. Plus, we'll be seeing tons of blood drives happening in Jackson. And our friends, of course, in the newsroom will have live coverage and highlights later tonight.
That's right. And I think that's interesting too, that we did have the blood drive folks on earlier this week and talking a little bit, because I think in these moments, especially if you weren't there when it happened, you're like, how can I remember? How can I give back besides learning? And I think when you do hands-on things like volunteering or giving blood, I feel like it makes people feel a little bit better, feel a little bit more connected. Other ways too, these events give time to talk about where they were on that day. And I know as we all kind of consistently get older, you know, more people weren't around when it happened, but I mean, I remember it. I remember I was in first grade and I remember hearing about it over the speaker. I remember our teacher talking about it. I remember my parents talking to me about it, kind of explaining as much as they can, and of course seeing all the coverage as well. And you're from that side as well.
Yeah, so obviously, as you guys know, I'm from New Jersey and my mom worked in Brooklyn at the time. I was in first grade when it happened, and my older sister went to school with me too, so she was in 6th grade. And the big problem was that, hey, do we send the kids home? Because a lot of these students have parents who live and work in New York City. Actually, I had a next door neighbor who worked in the tower where the planes crashed, and that really changed his life. Luckily, he wasn't hurt at all. He was late for work by a smidge because his daughter was crying that morning, my next door neighbor. So it is crazy at how like those few seconds can really change your life forever. But again, we're going to use the break to make sure we use this time to honor and respect those and remember those whose lives were lost and fought for our country that day.
Yep.